Hello, everyone. It's a great pleasure to be here. I'm Eng Seng Ho. I'm the director of the Middle East Institute. I should say that this is my first officiating function at the Middle East Institute, and I'm very happy to do that. I would also like to take the chance to register my thanks to Dr. Peter Sluglet, who has kept the ship afloat and steered it in the right direction for all this time now. And I'd also like to thank Michelle Yeo, the Deputy Director sitting over there. I'm the beneficiary of her organizational genius. She has really helped me with the transition and with putting things into place. We are very happy to have Mataya Tomba, who is a Qatar Fellow at MEI. He's been here, I think, twice now. This is his third chunk of time with us. And as most of you know, Mattia is an investment professional. He works with the Qatar Sovereign Wealth Fund, Qatari DR, where he has been managing a large equity portfolio, a lot of large equity deals, especially in real estate, I think. He works across all asset classes and geographic areas. So although he is Middle East plays an expert, I think he's experience and interest is worldwide. He has also worked with the Goldman Sachs Group. Sometimes it's a good name, sometimes it's not a good name, depending whether you're in Greece or outside of Greece. And he's also worked with the Merrill Lynch Group, the private wealth management team. He's a graduate of Fletcher School, of Tufts University and Bocconi University in Milan, Italy. So we'll give you Mataya Tomba.
I just say a quick thing about banks. A few years back, when you were working for a bank, you were, like God. Now, if you say that you work for a bank, but I remember a few years back during the crisis in 2008, I was speaking to an old woman, Italian old woman, who was very upset with what is happening, and she told me, the fault of what is happening are people like you working in the banks. So I told her to the woman, if you give me the gun, I can rob the bank. But if you give me a bank, I can rob the world. So basically, today I would like to speak about what happened in Iran and the region after the sanctions have been lifted in mid-January, so a few months back, basically. And I would like to start first by trying to understand why Iran and the United States came to agree on this nuclear deal. Going back to 2011, basically, when the Americans withdrew from Iraq, there was a sphere of influence going from Iran to the Mediterranean Sea. The reason why I say that is because you had Iran, you had Iraq, which was indirectly controlled by Iran. You have Syria with Bashar al-Assad and Lebanon with Hezbollah. So basically this was the sphere of influence that Iran had at that time. And Iran historically has been always relying on proxy to project its power. The reason why they do that is because if we look at the geography of Iran, they are surrounded by mountains, so it's always difficult for them to move the army because it's very costly, and very risky. So usually what they have been doing during the history was to utilize and manage relationships with local groups. That's what historically the Persian Empire did, and that's what they still do. And during the centuries, they became masters, basically, in managing these kind of relationships. So this was the arc of influence, and obviously the other powers in the region, like Turkey, Saudi, and Israel, they were not very happy with the current status. And if they wanted to stop and block these sphere of influence, Syria and Iraq were the two places where they had to act. And the Arab uprising at that time was useful to start. And that's basically how the wars in Syria and Iraq started. So Iran worked very hard to build this sort of influence, but then they realized that they were losing. and they knew that they couldn't defeat all the powers without help of the Americans. So this was the number one. Number two, they also knew that one of the ways to attract the attention of the Americans was by developing a nuclear program. Not a nuclear weapon, but a nuclear program. Because by doing that, you attract the attention of the US and you can try to negotiate with them. The issue is that the cost of the nuclear program was the economic sanctions, which hit very hardly the economy in Iran. You had basically foreign direct investments collapsing, you had inflation, depreciation of the country, depreciation of the currency. For example, the Iranian rials went, the exchange rate in 2010-11 was $1 for 6,000 rials. Today is $1 for 35,000 rials. So it's a huge depreciation. So this was the cost of trying to develop the nuclear program. So the interest of Iran was, we need the Americans because we're not able alone to defeat all the Sunni groups that are working in Iraq and Syria. We need to reach an agreement to fix all the issues that we have in our economy. Hence, it was important for them to reach an agreement with the United States. This was the Iranian side. On the other side, you had the Americans that fought 2 wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, and realized that it was relatively easy when you have superior military power to destroy a country, topple the government, but then when you have to rebuild the country, then it's very difficult. The only time where they managed to do that was during World War II, when basically they occupy and pacify Germany and Japan. But the cost of doing that was that basically, like Berlin at that time, 80% of Berlin was flat, and Japan had 2 nuclear bombs. So the cost of doing that was extremely high. So realized that they couldn't continue with this strategy, and they had to shift on the strategy. Point number one. Point number two is that Americans cannot tolerate Sunni extreme groups, non-state Sunni actors such as Islamic State. And so even for them, there was an interest to find an agreement with Iran, because the only strategy available for them was to move from active military engagement to a balance of power. Balance of power means that they need to have relationships with the main countries in the region where they want to reach this balance of power. The main countries are obviously Turkey, Israel, Saudi, and Iran. They had a relationship with 3 out of 4. Iran was the 4th country in East. The other option was to attack Iran, to destroy all the nuclear sites and so on, but this was extremely difficult and the outcome was not sure. So the only option available at the end was a diplomatic solution with Iran. So if we see the interests of Iran and the United States started to align. And that's basically what happened during Ahmadinejad time, when the Back Channel negotiation started in Oman, and this was in 2012. And then when the Rouhani government started in 2013, they continue with the negotiation until January 2016, the sanctions have been lifted. So that's why US and Iran reached an agreement. So if you look at the business community now, these people, they look at the world and they don't see many countries in the world that are so insulated and with so huge potential that are going back to the international stage. Today we have Cuba and North Korea, but even Cuba is opening. North Korea is probably far by the time they reach an agreement and they go back to international stage. So Iran, for the business community was the only country with a huge potential and the only one that was basically opening. The reason why the business community sees a huge potential is because Iran has 80 million population, so it's a big country. they have the fourth reserves for oil in the world and the first gas reserve in the world. The biggest gas field in the world so far is called North Field in Qatar and South Pars in Iran. It's basically shared between Qatar and Iran. So they are rich in resources, not just oil and gas, but also they have many minerals. They have a diversified economy because the industrial system is developed. So, for example, the automobile sector, it's very big and it's divided by two companies in Iran. One is Khodro and the other one is Saipa. Khodro did a joint venture with Peugeot, while Saipa did a joint venture with Renault. So you have an industrial system, you have a country that is rich in resources, you have a very young, educated population, you have somehow certain institutions that are in place. For example, there is a stock exchange. Obviously, it's not as liquid as the New York Stock Exchange, but still there is a stock exchange. While, for example, in other countries like Myanmar, you don't have these type of institutions yet. They will arrive in the coming years. And consider the fact that Iran has been insulated for many years, then the business community saw a huge potential to develop the business and find the investment opportunities there. And that's why so many delegations started in 2015 to go and try to understand how the country works and try to find business opportunities there. At the same time, obviously, the economy in Iran had certain issues because, as we said, the sanctions hit very hardly in the whole part of the economy. The employment went up to more than 20%. The banking sector was highly impacted because during Ahmadinejad time, what the government was doing was utilizing the banks as a sort of private equity type of entities to finance many groups that they were linked to the government. So the loans were given, let's say, more for political reasons than commercial reasons. The results after many years that the banks had a huge amount of non-performing loans. So obviously for the bank it's a huge problem. High inflation, even though in the last few years the Rouhani government managed to decrease the inflation, went down from say 40% to 10-15%. Other big problem was the high cost for trade and financial transactions, because during the sanctions, if people wanted to move money in and out from Iran, basically there were three options. Number one was Dubai, number two was Turkey, and number three was Malaysia. Yeah, a lot of transactions if you wanted to move money. So, but the problem of doing that is obviously there is a high cost for payments, for transactions, and so on. So these are the problems in the economy, which are, in the current context. On top of that, there is a structural problem in the economy of Iran, and that's why, and this cannot be changed, because this is driven by the geography. As we have said, Iran is mainly a mountain country. So if you want to move goods and people, you need to build infrastructure, and this has a cost. Hence, the profits for the industries will be always reduced for the cost of the infrastructure. So, as we said, the business community had huge expectations, and many delegations went there. But these expectations, if we look at what happened so far, they are not met. They're not met for different reasons. So many memorandum of understandings have been signed between foreign counterparts and the local Iranian entities, but real business so far is not happening. The reason why it's not happening, there are few reasons basically. US sanctions are still in place, so the Americans cannot do business with Iran yet. Both companies, both corporates and banks. And this is creating a lot of uncertainty in the banking system, both in Europe and in Asia. So the banks are not sure if they can process payments with Iran or not. When I speak with the bankers in Europe, the answer is always the same. We understand there are big opportunities there, but we are not sure if it's worth it to take the risk. Because in the past, the Americans fined BNP Paribas and other European banks for processing payments with Iran, so the European banks are still extremely cautious in doing business with Iran. So if there is no support of the banking system for a corporate that wants to do business with Iran, is extremely difficult. Interesting enough, the banks that today are operating with Iran on the European side are KBC in Belgium, DZ Bank in Germany, Ernest, which is an Austrian bank, and there are a couple of Italian banks. So these are the banks that currently are processing payments, transactions with Iran. But when you speak to them, interesting enough, what they process are transactions related to goods, so that they can see, I want to sell expensive to Iran and so on. They don't process transactions related to services yet. Because if you say I'm providing advisory services or that type of advisories, obviously the banks don't know exactly what is behind, so they don't feel confident in moving ahead with this one. So the European banks are reluctant, the Asian banks as well, and on top of that, the corporates in Iran, they need financing. So if you don't have the support of the banking sector in both places, it becomes really difficult to do business. That's why historically the main trading partner for Iran was China. China gave in the past a 20 billion credit line to Iran. So basically China was committing to buy oil from Iran, giving a credit line of 20 billion. In exchange of buying Chinese products. So today, if you are a business person and you want to develop your business in Iran, if you come in your proposal with, okay, I'm going to send my products and I'm also able to financing you, that's very appealing for the local counterparts. So that's one of the reasons why the business is struggling to develop there. Number two, the system there is very opaque and very complex. So for the people who don't know Iran, it takes a lot of time to understand how things work there. Number one, they need to find a local partner to do business with, but if you need to find a local partner, it takes time to build the relationships and so on. And then, since the system is opaque and the sanctions still cover certain groups, people again are scared of doing business with entities that might be on the blacklist, basically. And one of the questions that sometimes people ask is, for example, I want to sell pencil and other station material to a company in Iran. This company, I know that buys raw materials from another entity that is related to the Pashdara. Can I do that or not? Because these people say, basically, I'm helping a company that is doing business with an entity that is related to a group that is still on the blacklist. So there is so much uncertainty that is difficult for the people to move ahead. It will take time. We said the system is complex. There is a huge amount of bureaucracy I was speaking recently to a friend of mine in Tehran, and I was telling him that here in Singapore it takes 1 day and $1 to open a company, and he was shocked because probably in Iran it will take months to do the same thing. So obviously these delays thing. Then another thing is that there are many Iranians today who are from US and UK are moving back to the country because obviously they want to leverage the knowledge they have to develop the business there. So if a European sees an Iranian guy from London, US, going to Iran and trying to develop the business, they think, okay, this might be my good local partner because he lives in London, it's easy for me. Good. The main problem is that these people are watched extremely carefully by the government, and some of them are in prison. So again, we might understand why the Iranian government does that, because obviously they don't trust the Iranians who lived many years in UK and in US. But again, from a business point of view, this creates and adds a lot of uncertainty to develop the business. Another thing is the level of sovereign debt. From one side, having a low level of debt because the government repaid the debt, let's say late 90s, early 2000, it's a good thing for let's say macroeconomic point of view. But on the other side, when the business people look at the risk, they don't have a benchmark. Because if I know that this country has a sovereign debt and the yield is 5%, for example, I know that that's the sovereign risk, and this is, for me, is the benchmark to analyze the opportunities there. How long it will take by the time they will issue that and so on, we don't know. It will arrive, but we don't know yet. Another thing is that there are still a lot of frozen assets, Iranian frozen assets abroad, that they were supposed to come back, but for different reasons they're not back yet. And this is impacting the liquidity of the country. This creates a huge debate internally, because when the former Iranian government moved money outside, they thought that putting money in European banks was safe, but then obviously the people now are blaming the previous government who did that, because now it is becoming extremely difficult to repatriate this money. So for all these reasons, the business is struggling to develop that. Some deals were announced, but at the end these were more a media PR type of thing. For example, when Rouhani went to Italy to get to France, they signed an agreement to sell, I think, more than 100 Airbus and so on. But at the end, who is going to pay for that? We don't know, number one. Number two, the agreement is not finalized yet. Number three, the current pipeline, if you are a country and you want to order Airbus, the current pipeline of Airbus is 7 years. So for 7 years they cannot do anything. So these are the current problems. If we see in Europe, the most active are probably the Italians. The Prime Minister went there, and Italy allocated 5 billion euro as credit guarantees for Italian corporates that do business with Iran. So basically, what does it mean? It means that if an Italian company sells products, goods to Iran, they are supposed to be paid by the Iranian counterpart. But if the Iranian counterpart does not pay, the Italian government agency covers for the loss. So that's the only way, for the time being, to structure the trade. This is for Italy, for any other country, because the liquidity is limited, the risk is very high, so the corporate do business only if they know that there is this sort of guarantee. I mean, these credit export-import agencies exist exactly for this reason. So that's basically what is happening on the business community. And what is happening on the Iranian side. Even on the Iranian side, locally, there were high expectations about this deal. People were thinking that in January, the deal was signed, and after that, the billions of dollars could come to the country. So there was a huge expectations for that. But then, obviously, this is not happening, and the government is under pressure. It's under pressure because they built basically everything around this deal, and they have to prove that this deal is a good thing for the country. And the only way of proving is by showing that the economy is improving, and that they will receive money, investments, and so on. Number one. Number two, there will be the election in 2017, because the presidency lasted 4 years, like in US. So next year there will be the election, and there is no much time left for the Iranian government to show that what they have done is good for the country. So that's the kind of pressure. They're trying to rush to finalize as many deals as possible and facilitate things. But even the law for the oil contracts so far has not been approved. So it's not clear yet if you are an oil major how you can operate in the country. They were supposed to change the law because in the past the law was not in favor of the foreign counterparts. Basically, your profit was capped. So now they are trying to change the law. But all these changes are taking time, inevitably. So internally, you have this struggle among the different factions. You have people who belong to, let's say, pragmatic conservative, like Rouhani, and these people are in favor, obviously, of economic opening, foreign direct investments, and so on. But they're not so keen in changing from a social point of view, so giving more freedom to the people and so on. They're very cautious about that. The reformists, on the other side, yes, they want to push for the economic growth, but also the social liberalization, the media freedom, and so on. But in my view, I think this is unlikely to happen in the short term. And then you have the hardliners that they control the security, the intelligence, and a big chunk of the economy. And obviously, these people are negatively affected somehow by lifting the sanctions. The reason why I say that is because during the sanctions, these people could enjoy sort of monopoly in certain sectors. So now if you open the economy and you let the foreigners enter, then obviously your interests are negatively affected. So of course these people, they don't want a big opening of the economy, even though they realize that something needs to be done in order to solve all the issues in the economy. And the hardliners are still popular in any case in the country, especially in the rural areas. So at the end you have, let's say, three main factions, I would say. The people who are pragmatic, like Rouhani, you have the reformists, you have the hardliners, and so on. And at the end, this will be the role of the supreme leader to try to find the balance among the different factions to make sure that there will be a balance in the country. And that's extremely important because they cannot afford, they need to fix the economy. In Tehran, when I speak to the people, a lot of people need to do 2-3 jobs in order to survive. So the economy needs to improve. Around they have a fragmentation, the Arab world, they have a fragmentation, so this might be a risk and opportunity for them. And social economically, people want more freedom. So you have these different factions. these are the options and the constraints, and the supreme leader will find the balance. This will be his role in the country. Most likely, I think what is going to happen, it will be a pragmatic approach where there is an opening, but not the kind of opening that the people are expecting, especially in Europe. To be very, very pragmatic, because at the end you need to reach a compromise among the different interests and the different factions. So if this is what is happening in the country, what is happening in the region? So by lifting sanctions, some people were expecting that peace will arrive, but it's quite the opposite, because by moving a peace in a region that is always very unstable, by the time all the countries readjust, number one, it will take many years, and number two, it will go through violence, conflicts, wars, and so on. And we see that already happening. We know the wars in Syria, in Iraq, the instability in Bahrain, in Lebanon, the war in Yemen, and so on. So why this is happening is because Iran found a new international legitimacy, and they use that to increase and consolidate its influence in the region. But obviously, other countries, such as Saudi, Turkey, and Israel, and the GCC, they will try to stop it. The primary focus of Iran will be Baghdad. The reason why I said Baghdad, because historically the threats for Iran, they come from the West. So they need to secure the western flank first. So they need to make sure that Baghdad is under their control, or at least under their influence. Number one. So they need to control Baghdad, and number two, because Baghdad is basically the launch pad to project power in the region. Historically, as we know, the Caliphate had the two capitals, Baghdad and Damascus. And these still today are the most important places in the region, if you want to project and have a sphere in influence. So how the others are reacting? If we look at Saudi, obviously Saudi is not happy. Apart from the Sunni-Shia divide that for sure is there, historically Saudi and Iran are enemies. The region has been dominated by Arabs, Persians, and Ottomans. So for Saudi and see an Iran rising, it's a threat, and they need to counter this threat. The problem is that in Saudi there are 30 million people, in Iran 80 million people. They will not go to war directly because it's too risky, too costly, but they will go to wars through proxies in different places all around the region. And what Saudi is trying to do is trying to build a coalition of countries to make sure that a lot of countries will be under their umbrellas to counter Iran. We can see that in Egypt, for example. And why Egypt and Saudi are close? Because Egypt is struggling from economic point of view. I remember 2 months ago there was a cargo of commodities, grain commodities, that could not enter in Egypt because Egypt didn't have the dollars to buy. So that's a small example to show how the economy is struggling there. So they need somehow the money of Saudi, which obviously now is much less because of the oil price, but still they need the money of the Saudi. And Saudi needs Egypt because number one is a big country. Number two, they have to control and shape the ideology that starts in Egypt, and so they need to be very close. Even Sudan is somehow part of the coalition because of the manpower Sudan can give. Interesting enough, Sudan was used by Iran in the past to move arms and weapons to Palestine. But recently, Saudi managed to convince, obviously with the help of money, to bring Sudan under their influence. the main issue for Saudi is that at the same time they have to deal with multiple challenges. They have an economy that is struggling because of the low oil prices. They have wars in the north. They have a war in the south. They are going through a historical transition with new people running the country. They have internal security problem. They are challenged even by the ideology of other Sunni groups, like the Islamic State or the Muslim Brothers. So they have to deal with multiple challenges at the same time, and it will not be easy for them. At the same time, the fact that US wants to have a balance of power in the region, it also means that Saudi is not the exclusive partner of the United States in the region anymore. So the relationship they enjoyed is not as good as the relationship they had before. So these are the problems for Saudi. From the Israeli point of view, same as Saudi, obviously the relationship with the United States is not as good as before. So at the end, the United States reached an agreement with an enemy of Israel. So from this point of view, it's not the best thing for them. But at the same time, it's not as bad as some people say, because if Israel looks around, they see Syria, Hezbollah, and other groups that historically represent a threat to the state that are fighting against each other. So until these people that are busy fighting against each other, they will not represent a threat to Israel. Turkey, in my view, will be the dominant power in the region in the coming years. The reason why I say that is because they have a strong economy, which is going through difficult times now, but it's a big economy. It's the second economy in the Muslim world after Indonesia. It's relatively stable. They have the US support, and slowly they will be dragged into the conflict in Syria and Iraq. So far, what they tried to do was to use certain groups, Sunni groups in the region, try to support them and try to shape them in a form that they like it. But this strategy is proving difficult. So with the US pressure, I think slowly they will intervene more and more directly into these areas. And this, for me, will represent the starting point of a bigger influence of Turkey in the region. What the other GCC states are doing, you see some differences. For example, in case of Qatar, they have a more open approach, because at the end with Iran they share the biggest gas reserves, so somehow they need to get along with Saudi and with Iran. And you see Emirates, which is an interesting case because they have Abu Dhabi, which is very close politically to Saudi, but Dubai, that is extremely keen in developing the business with Iran, because Dubai at the end is the hub of the region, so they can only benefit if Iran opens and the trade with Iran increases. You have Kuwait that needs to manage the Shia minority in the country, so even for them they need to have a balanced approach. The GCC country that is probably more open towards Iran is Oman. And we said at the beginning that the back channel negotiation between the US and Iran started in Oman, and I'm aware of only one bank from GCC that is operating in Tehran at the moment, and this bank is Bank of Muscat. And historically, they have been trading a lot with Iran, and they always try to benefit by the fact that they have an approach to the Gulf and to the Indian Ocean, and that's why even recently they developed the city of Dukme, which is on the Indian Ocean, to benefit from the trade among the Gulf, the East Africa, India, and so on. Okay, so that's basically my view on what has been happening in the region after the sanctions have been lifted. Thank you.
Thank you, Mattia. Thank you. That's quite a